Welcome to Bristol and the Living in Love and Faith course. This course aims to help us think more deeply about what it means to be human and how to live in love and faith.
All around us we see changing understandings of human identity, changing patterns in relationships and families, and changing sexual attitudes. What does it mean to followers of Jesus to walk in love, faith and holiness today? Session 1 explores what it means to learn together as followers of Jesus Christ. In Session 2, we'll discover how our identity in Christ relates to sex and gender. Session 3 looks at what kinds of relationships God calls us to. In Session 4, we'll explore where our bodies and sex fit into all of this. And in Session 5, we'll look at how diversity and difference affects our life together as a church.
In each session, an opening reflection about learning together is followed by 2 sections of teaching, time for discussion and a Bible study. We'll also see 2 real-life stories. The sessions end with an invitation to reflect on our learning and bring it to God in prayer.
As well as the course, don't forget to explore the Living in Love and Faith book, films, podcasts and other resources which are all available for free on the website.
The topics we'll be exploring affect us all, though we may approach them quite differently. We're not always good at doing this. Not everyone experiences our own church, the Church of England, as a welcoming, kind and safe environment. In fact, some have experienced rejection, hostility or scorn. We need to do our part in creating a safe space in which we can relate honestly, graciously and lovingly to one another. To help us do this, each of the sessions begins with a short reflection based on one of the Church of England's pastoral principles for living well together. Their purpose is to help church communities to examine afresh their life together in the face of difference and diversity. Let's take a look at a film all about them.
My name is Rosemary Mallet.
I live right in the centre of the city of Durham.
I'm the Bishop of Newcastle.
I'm married and my wife's name is Fiona.
I'm the chair of the Pastoral Advisory Group.
We're here to tell you about these, which are the pastoral principles for living well together.
The principles are all about how we help the church be the best we can in terms of being a welcoming, inclusive community for all of us. In particular, LGBTI+ people.
This is a series of cards which you can use in a parish setting for us to talk about openly, in particular addressing what we've regarded and called the 6 pervasive evils.
So the first principle is acknowledging prejudice. We need to discover and own our prejudices because once you're aware of them, they don't dominate and rule you anymore.
The second principle is about speaking into silence. All too often we've been unwilling even to discuss matters that are really important in this area.
The third principle talks about the need to address ignorance, for us each to hear other people's stories and to know really why they've made the decisions they've made.
The fourth principle is about casting out fear. If we're afraid of somebody because they are different to us, we aren't able to relate properly.
The fifth principle encourages us to just admit hypocrisy, that so often in the Church of England people have said one thing and done another.
The 6th principle is that we must pay attention to power. Most of us have power within our situations. We need to recognise the power that we have and then to use that power for good.
You might like to take and use these pastoral principles to form part of a discussion at your parochial church council or at your deanery synod or as part of a small group programme or with your youth group.
I'm actually an LGBT person, and there are people who have points of disagreement in relation to their theological position. So we've had to find a way of working respectfully with one another.
I've really enjoyed the opportunity of being on the Pastoral Advisory Group to talk about my own experience of same-sex attraction as somebody who is celibate, as well as hear other people's stories about how to live their lives.
This project encourages us to love and to care and to be inclusive of all around us.
We really hope that these resources will be truly used as we learn together how to welcome one another better, how to understand each other, how to be better Christians.
With these pastoral principles in mind, let's make some commitments for our learning together. We commit to enabling everyone to speak, but without putting people on the spot if they don't wish to speak. Avoiding interrupting each other and acknowledging what others say before moving on to have our say. Keeping confidential anything personal that's shared. Taking care about how we speak about others who are not in the room. And being sensitive to people's feelings.
Let's take a look at the aims for session 1. We aim to get to know each other in our group.
We're going to explore how we can create a safe space for our learning together.
We want to recognise different ways we learn as disciples of Jesus.
And we want to think about what is involved in learning about identity, sexuality, relationships and marriage.
We'll start by focusing on a pastoral principle before thinking about what's involved in learning together in the context of living in love and faith. After a Bible study on Matthew 7, we'll think about what's involved in learning about identity, sexuality, relationships and marriage. We'll then watch a taster film of some of the people we'll meet through the story films in the forthcoming sessions. And we'll close with some time for reflection and prayer. Pause the video and take a moment to be still together in God's presence. You may want to use this prayer as a way into the session.
When it comes to learning together, two things are needed. We're called to listen to God and to each other as we study the Bible and the world around us together. And we're called to speak about our own experiences and understanding. And we're called to be open to learning from each other and from God.
Listening and speaking to each other in this way is joyful because it allows the love of Christ to flow between us. It's powerful because it enables us to learn together as disciples of Christ even when we disagree. Not listening is powerful too. It silences and disempowers people and deepens our divisions.
The subjects we're exploring are deeply personal. We may have very strong feelings and convictions about them. This can make both speaking and listening hard. Think about a time when you were listened to attentively and how that made you feel. Listening well affirms the person being listened to. It's a way of expressing God's love. And think about the opposite experience of sharing something important and realizing the person you were speaking to wasn't really listening. That can be a painful experience that makes us wary of speaking up again.
Our first challenge is to listen deeply to each other. This means giving whoever is speaking all our attention. It means putting aside our instinct to interrupt and noticing our own feelings of fear, empathy or anger and not letting it get in the way of our listening. It also means remembering that the person who is speaking is loved and cherished by God. Lastly, it means checking that we've listened well by reflecting back what we've heard and asking if that's what the person was trying to say.
Our second challenge is to be willing to speak, to share our stories and talk about our feelings, views, doubts and fears. We might have had a bad experience that makes us afraid to speak up. Everyone needs to make their own judgment about what to share. We can all help to create a safe space by listening respectfully and with the love of God. A good place to start is by listening to one another.
Use the Leaders' Notes that can be found on the Living in Love and Faith Learning Hub to guide you through a listening exercise.
The Gospels describe Jesus' followers as disciples. Disciple just means learner. As followers of Jesus, we're called to be learners. We all learn through a variety of different ways. By doing, by listening, by reading, by seeing, by discussing with others. Most of us learn through a combination of these, and probably all of us learn through stories.
Jesus understood this. Sometimes he started a conversation by asking a question. Oftentimes, he taught crowds in the synagogue or outdoors, but more often than not, he had a story up his sleeve.
In this course too, we'll be learning in different ways. By reading the Bible, listening to teaching, hearing stories and discussing together.
To begin with, we will focus on something that may be even more important than learning about identity, sexuality, relationships and marriage. It's about learning and growing together as disciples of Jesus Christ. By together, we mean the people who are in your group who may have very different life experiences and views. But we also mean together with the people whose stories you can read about or watch on film. And we mean together with the people who have contributed to this course and the other Living in Love and Faith resources. They include lay people, clergy, bishops, and experts in a variety of subjects. Among these are people with different lived experiences of sexuality and gender and different convictions. They're listed on the Living in Love and Faith website.
And we want to learn together with all the groups around the country who, like you, are using this course.
Our experiences, learning and discernment will be gathered, listened to and reflected on by the bishops together with members of General Synod as they discern the way forward for the Church of England regarding questions of identity, sexuality, relationships and marriage.
We've seen how we often learn from stories. Let's turn to one of the stories Jesus told to reflect on what he had to say about learning.
A reading from Matthew chapter 7, verse 24 onwards. Jesus said, "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and acts on them will be like a wise man who built his house on rock. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and beat on that house, but it did not fall because it had been founded on rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not act on them will be like a foolish man who built his house on sand. The rain fell, the floods came, the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was its fall." Now when Jesus had finished saying these things, the crowds were astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority and not as their scribes. These verses come at the end of the Sermon on the Mount, the first section of Jesus' teaching in the Gospel of Matthew. And here, Jesus is teaching about the way of life that embodies the kingdom of heaven. Matthew records 4 other sections of Jesus' teaching in chapters 10, 13, 18 and 20 to 25. And in between, he tells of the miracles that Jesus performed and of the other events of his life, death and resurrection. It's as if the gospel structure is deliberately designed to emphasise the connections between learning and living, hearing and doing. And at the beginning of chapter 5, Matthew tells us that when Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he'd sat down, his disciples came to him. Then he began to speak and taught them. And beginning with the Beatitudes, Matthew records Jesus' teaching about a whole host of topics. They include anger, adultery, divorce, forgiveness, giving to the poor, prayer, fasting, worrying, and judging others. And he finishes with this story about the wise and foolish builders. And the crowd is astounded at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority. Here is Jesus the teacher, teaching his disciples, teaching us, so that we can learn to truly live as the people of the kingdom of God.
It's all too easy to skip over the details of this familiar story. Pause the video for 15 minutes or so and read verses 24 to 27 again, slowly. What do you think it tells us about learning and about life as a follower of Jesus? Can you remember a time when you were astounded by Jesus' teaching?
We've seen how the people in the Matthew 7 passage describe Jesus' teaching not only as astounding, but as having authority. When we set out to learn about something, we want to be sure that the person who is teaching us really knows what they're talking about. For followers of Jesus, believe that true teaching is found first and foremost in the Bible. It sets the story of Jesus within the story of God, who reached out in love, creating the world and all of us in it. It tells how humankind turned and continues to turn away from God's love, and how the whole world is affected by our turning away, our sin. It tells how God, seeing that we could not help ourselves, came among us in Jesus Christ and proclaimed the good news of the kingdom of God. It tells of Jesus' arrest, torture, execution, suffering the condemnation that should be ours. And it tells of Jesus raised by God from the dead, now gloriously alive and still with us by the Holy Spirit, making everything new. It tells of the certain hope that one day this transformation will be complete and Christ will return. The Bible is central to the life of the church. But how do its many kinds of writing, poetry, laws, history, letters, relate to our questions about identity, sexuality, relationships, and marriage? How do we discern the wisdom of God, especially when it's often seen as foolishness in the world? How do our questions relate to the questions that the Bible addresses in different languages and cultures from our own? Answering these questions involves listening carefully to one another, to other Christians who have passed the faith on to us, and to people who have given their lives to studying the Bible. We'll find that Christians understand the same texts in different ways, and that will raise questions about how the Bible is to be interpreted. The Church of England teaches that the Bible contains all things necessary for salvation, and that it uniquely reveals the faith we profess. But the Bible itself also encourages us to learn about the world and God's work in it from the past and from nature. The psalmist says, "I remember the days of old. I think about all your deeds. I meditate on the works of your hands." And the heavens declare the glory of God. The skies proclaim the work of his hands. Day after day they pour forth speech. Night after night they reveal knowledge. That's why we too will be exploring what history and the sciences can teach us. We learn from history, including the Church's own history. We learn from the wisdom of its practices tested over time, but also from its mistakes and failures. As the experiences of different minority groups in the Church and wider society remind us, however, learning from history can be complex. It depends on whose history is being told and who is doing the telling. The sciences teach us by showing the amazing complexity and diversity of the natural world. Doing science glorifies the God who created all things. But science never has the last word. There's always more to discover. We've seen this during the COVID-19 pandemic. Listening to the science has not always provided simple answers to our questions about what to do. That doesn't lessen its importance. It just means that science, like history and the Bible itself, is not always straightforward to interpret.
There are two other things to think about as we prepare to learn together.
As Christians, the Bible is our source for Jesus' teaching. And like many other parts of the Bible, that teaching is rooted in its own time and place.
Jesus was born a Jew at a particular time in a specific cultural, political and social context of the Middle East in the 1st century.
However, because of who Jesus is, how he lived and what he taught, we believe that his teaching relates to all times and places. We need to understand Jesus' context as well as our own to grasp what he's asking of us.
Finally, we learn by listening to real-life stories of followers of Jesus today, how they've understood his call upon their lives.
Some of these stories are available in the Living in Love and Faith book and on film. But we all have our own stories to share. And each of us will have in mind the stories of family members or friends which relate to the questions we're exploring.
Stories invite us to step out of our concerns into those of someone else. They remind us that we're all imperfect, often with complicated and messy lives.
By paying attention to the stories of people with different, even opposing understandings, we take a step towards becoming a community of believers who love one another with the love of Christ, and are open to the possibility that Jesus is teaching us all through our learning together.
Let's take a sneak peek at some of the video stories that we'll be seeing later in the series.
I do expect people to respect me, but I don't expect people to know what to do with me. Some people might never have met a trans person before.
Marriage to us means just a deep sense of commitment.
Being a Christian and being gay, I found a brilliant church. I don't have to hide anything about myself.
Being Christians, we've got a view of marriage that just is important for raising family.
I was born with intersex traits. I would love to feel that I can be me along with everybody else.
You would have love for somebody to treat you as they treat other people.
God has still provided, it just wasn't in the way that I expected.
Pause the video and spend 10 minutes sharing your thoughts about what you've seen and heard. What are the questions that trouble you most about identity, sexuality, relationships, and marriage?
As this first session draws to a close, spend a few moments thanking God for each other. See the leaders' notes on the Living in Love and Faith Learning Hub for a way of doing this, perhaps finishing with this prayer.